So Night Rain is releasing this month, so I'm gonna make a couple of videos about FromSoft games. The first one being a ranking video. Yeah, I know, how interesting. But hopefully, the topic I'm gonna talk about is at least unique enough to have you not completely ignore the video. So let me get straight into it. I'm gonna rank how messed up each Souls game world is. Not just the location the game sets place in, but the overall state of the world that each game takes place in general. Kind of a mixture of both. For the most part, the status of the world outside the locations that the games take place in is left quite ambiguous. I can piece a bit together based on a few item descriptions and NPC dialogue, for example, but a lot of it is going to be speculative, so anyway, let's go. By the way, I have a decent grasp on the lore of all these various games. However, I'm not a scholar or anything like that, so I'm not saying this list is going to be 100% accurate, so go cry about it if you disagree. These first two are a bit tough to rank. Well, I mean, the whole list in general is kind of tough to rank, but these two aren't set in the end of days like most of the others. Bloodborne is set in Yharnam, a secluded city or town in a mountainous region which has been devastated by the scourge of beasts and alien space gods' influence. Everyone who is not a furry have gone mad, and in the night of the hunt that we play in, it lasts more than a regular night. Unlike a couple of the other settings in this series, Yharnam pretty much has no hope left.
Yharnam's done for, tell ya.
Now, with this said, it would seem like maybe Bloodborne should rank a bit higher, but remember, I said I'm taking into account the outside world as well, and the truth is we pretty much know nothing about what lies outside of Yharnam. We know of one other location that suffered the same fate as Yharnam, Loran, but it's made apparent that this was an age ago, indicating that this scourge isn't a regular occurrence in this world. There is another item description somewhere that these guys chased a beast to Yharnam from a different location, but that's about it. So yeah, Yharnam is done for, I'll tell ya. But the world it takes place in isn't taking place during a worldwide apocalyptic event like most of the other games. Sure, the Great Ones could very well have their tentacles meddling in other parts of the world also, but the truth is, pretty much everything outside of Yharnam is unknown. You know, now that I think about it, maybe Sekiro and Bloodborne should be swapped. I don't know, let's get into it and see how I feel. So this is the only game that takes place on Earth, of course an alternate version, and takes place during the Sengoku period, which was known for being an over 100-year-old bloody conflict where Japan were basically in a massive royal rumble. Yeah, Yharnam is obviously inspired by Victorian era, but I wouldn't say Bloodborne necessarily takes place on Earth. The setting of Ashina in Sekiro is mostly the army of the province, preparing for conflict against the invading Interior Ministry. Not exactly on the same level as threat as demons threatening to consume the world, or time and the whole world in general collapsing in on itself. Of course, there's quite a bit of fantastical elements to Sekiro, mainly about immortality. If you are asked at the game and die a lot, Ashina will pretty much become plagued, as that's a side effect of the wolf's dragon heritage or something like that. I don't even remember what it's called. The first half of the game is just Ashina warriors standing around anticipating war. The second half is where you see more of the more fucked up parts of Ashina, like the decrepit monks who were obsessed with being immortal but mostly just got centipedes up their asses, which kind of does make them immortal to be fair, but at what price? Mibu village is full of zombie-like people after drinking the water, and Ashina near the end of the game eventually gets invaded. So while Yharnam is probably more cooked than Ashina, I'm going to put Sekiro above Bloodborne due to the world outside of the game settings. As I said before, Sekiro takes place in the Sengoku era from, to be honest, I don't even know how long. I'm seeing a lot of conflicting dates here, but whatever. A long time, basically. So Japan as a whole was a mess, and I'm not a historian, but I imagine the rest of the world wasn't exactly stable either in this time period. Whatever, Bloodborne and Sekiro are interchangeable. It's really not that deep. I don't know about you, but I always got the impression that the era Dark Souls 2 takes place in is not as messed up as the other two entries in the series, the Dark Souls series I mean. Yes, of course, Jang Lake is a complete mess, but I feel like we get a decent amount of item descriptions and dialogue that suggests the outside world is actually in a more normal state, as much as it can be in a FromSoft game anyway. Basically, the fire seems to be a lot less faded than it is in Dark Souls 1 and 3. Sure, the undead curse has broken out again, but it feels like it's in the more early stages. I definitely could be wrong, but that's just the impression I got. But yeah, Jang Lake itself is just like every other FromSoft setting, is in the mud. A land full of hollows that is in ruins thanks to a massive war with the arsehole faced giants, and its king in hiding from his evil psychotic queen. Also, before I move on, I'm not considering any endings when ranking this, as I think it would kind of defeat the purpose of this video. I mean, if we considered the bad ending of the next game on this list, Demon Souls, then Demon Souls would be ranked a bit higher than this, let's just say. So yeah, let's get onto Demon Souls. Demon Souls is a bit of a weird one to place, as it's said that the colourless fog that spawns in demons only covers the kingdom of Boletaria, which is actually said to be a small kingdom. Then why are demons present in Latria, the Shrine of Storms, and the Valley of Defilement? Are these lands all in the kingdom of Boletaria? It doesn't really seem so, especially in Latria, which has its own monarch. I looked up a bunch of people's opinion on this, and everyone was just giving completely different answers, so I don't have a clue. This is somewhat important when ranking this because we are talking about a small kingdom that is getting bodied by demons, or multiple areas in the world. It's not very clear, so I'm just going to rank it in the middle. Regardless of what the answer is, the colourless fog that contains hordes of demons is spreading past Boletaria and threatens to consume every land, almost inevitably if it wasn't for some guy with a stick. Obviously the current lands in the fog are most likely a bloodbath, but I'd also imagine that the outside world would be in complete disarray about this event. Yeah, as I just said a minute ago, I'm not including the endings, and this is a very good example why. Because if you pick a bad ending for this game, then yeah, it's like number 1 or 2. Dark Souls 1 lands in the middle of the other 2 Dark Souls games. Now, this game takes place at the second point in history that the flame is fading. As with every other game on this list, the actual setting is a mess, and I remember for a while that I thought the whole world that the game takes place in was in this state also. And while I still believe that it is to an extent, there's actually quite a bit of item description and dialogue talking about other locations in the world. Now, it's not like the state of these locations are particularly detailed or in depth, but it gives me the impression that the world isn't as fucked up as I first thought. That might seem a bit similar to what I said about Dark Souls 2, so why is Dark Souls 1 placed higher? Well, as I said earlier, the dialogue and item descriptions, I'd say, divulge a bit more about the state of the world in Dark Souls 2 than it does in Dark Souls 1, so... But yeah, it is very speculative. I mean, I am just guessing, but I definitely do get the feeling that the flame has waned more in Dark Souls 1 than Dark Souls 2. As for the actual setting itself, Lordran, it's another land overrun by hollows, putrid dwellings such as the Depths and Blighttown, the Abyss lurking right under New Londo, the birthplace of demons in this blinding hellscape, and Tomb of the Giants. The only appealing looking place is Anor Londo, which is seemingly deserted and also has an illusionary sun to keep the place from being plunged into darkness. Actually, that's another reason I'd put Dark Souls 1 above 2. Dark Souls 2 actually has quite a bit of colour in a decent amount of areas, which gives it a more lively feel. Yes, Jang Lake is far from being lively, but I think you get what I mean. I think most people can agree that the Lands Between has a potentially more hopeful future than a few of the other settings of these games. Like, the world of Dark Souls is pretty much fucked no matter what by the end of Dark Souls 3. The state of the Lands Between that we play in, despite the potential hope for the future, is a completely worn-torn, curse-riddled, diseased island with multiple outer gods having influence over it. I mean, seriously, look at all the shit that's going on. The Flame of Frenzy is lurking in the sewers, with its effects being seen in multiple places up above. Shit Eater is trying to spread his shit curse. Whatever the fuck has become of Godwyn has spread, bringing back the dead. Moog runs a blood cult for some evil outer god, the Formless Mother. Also, I just want to say, Just because Moog beat the pedo allegations doesn't automatically make him a good person now, as a lot of people want you to believe. And Melania decided to nuke Kaled because she was so salty that she was losing to Radahn. Alright, so what about the outside of the lands between? Well, there's a few lands mentioned. 2 of them are the Badlands and the Land of Reeds. The Land of Reeds is said to be in constant conflict. I think it says constant civil war as well. I'm not so sure about that. And the Badlands is seemingly a wild place that has a brutal tribalistic culture. I imagine Godfrey had to fight a lot in these lands to rise to chieftain. And finally, I think it's likely that the Outer Gods have a lot more influence on this world than the Great Ones in Bloodborne, for example. Which is a problem because the Outer Gods that we know of aren't exactly very pleasant. So as I have said, a lot of these placements are very interchangeable. I don't want to see anyone whining in the comments about these placements. It's really not that deep. Saying this, I think we can all agree that Dark Souls 3 is definitely at the top of this list. It's got to the point where the flame has exceeded its expiry date for so long that linking it again seemingly barely does anything. The lands of the world are collapsing and contorting into each other. In the other 2 Dark Souls games, the world outside of the settings that the game takes place in appear to be portrayed as somewhat normal, but in Dark Souls 3 it really does seem that the whole world is a complete mess, and that the linking of the flame wouldn't even be able to fix anything anymore. Plus, people say that the fight with Gale takes place at the end of time, which I don't know how true that is. I was never a fan of Dark Souls 3 lore. If that is true, then we can see that the world is a barren wasteland with ash flooding cities. As for the actual areas and locations you play in, it's just your standard putrid Fromsoft setting. Although Dark Souls 3 takes place in multiple kingdoms, unlike Dark Souls 1 and 2, as again, everything is collapsing into itself, and time doesn't make sense anymore. But yeah, anyway, this list is very subjective and speculative, so if you disagree with it, go cry about it or something. Goodbye.